Welcome to Equip, Build, and Mature. Hope you're having a great Tuesday. As I like to do on Tuesdays, I want to share a word of encouragement with you. So today we're going to be looking at a story coming from Mark chapter 10. When Mark recorded the healing of blind Bartimaeus, he included a very small detail that is very easy to miss as you're reading through it. But once you've noticed it, it's very hard to forget. Bartimaeus sat by the roadside, begging. He heard that Jesus of Nazareth was going to pass by. So he began to cry out. We read of this in Mark chapter 10, verse 47. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Well, the people around him, the crowd, they rebuked him and they told him to be quiet. But he cried out even more. Then Jesus stopped. When Jesus called for Bartimaeus, Mark wrote in Mark 10:50, so throwing off his cloak, this is Bartimaeus throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. So we need to pause here and understand that detail. Mark did not simply say that Bartimaeus stood up. He did not simply say that he went to Jesus. Mark said that Bartimaeus threw off his cloak. Now, at first, that may sound very irrelevant. Sounds like a minor action in this story. But in a narrative where details are often carefully preserved, the gesture that was recorded was deliberate. Why even mention the cloak? Well, the answer begins to emerge when we remember who Bartimaeus was in that moment. He was blind. He was sitting by the road. Mark clearly said that Bartimaeus was a beggar. For someone in that condition, a cloak was very significant. In the ancient world, a cloak could serve as a garment, a covering for warmth, a blanket for the cool nights, and even a practical way of collecting money. For a poor man sitting at the edge of the road, his cloak may have been one of the very few things he owned. That means the cloak was not only something he wore, it was part of how he survived his condition. And with that understanding, the gesture becomes even more striking. When Jesus called Bartimaeus, Bartimaeus did not slowly gather himself. He did not first secure all of his belongings. He threw the cloak aside and moved toward the voice that called him. The action suggests urgency, but it also reveals something about faith. Bartimaeus' cry for mercy as one who could not yet see Jesus was important. But when Jesus called him, he responded with the belief that getting to Jesus mattered more than holding on to the one thing that had carried him through his old condition. The cloak belonged to the life of a blind beggar on the side of the road. But Bartimaeus did not hold on to that when Jesus called him. Mark did not describe the cloak as sinful. The point is not that clothing had to be abandoned. The point is that when the moment came, Bartimaeus did not let what had once been necessary slow him down from moving toward the voice of Jesus. The story also becomes more meaningful when placed in its immediate context in Scripture. Just before this narrative, Jesus had again spoken about his coming, suffering, death, and resurrection. And just before Bartimaeus, James and John had approached Jesus seeking places of honor in his kingdom. That contrast is worth noticing. The disciples, though physically sighted, were still struggling to see the kind of Messiah that Jesus really was. Bartimaeus, though physically blind, recognized Jesus as the Son of David, and he cried out for mercy. And when Jesus called him, he responded without hesitation. In that sense, the cloak became part of the larger theme of sight in Mark's gospel. Bartimaeus was still blind, but he moved decisively toward the voice of Jesus. Others saw with their eyes and were slow to see with faith. Bartimaeus went to Jesus. Jesus asked, Mark 10:51, "What do you want me to do for you?" Bartimaeus simply replied, "Rabbi, I want to see." So Jesus tells him in 10:52 of Mark, "Go, your faith has saved you." Mark immediately clarified that Bartimaeus recovered his sight and followed Jesus on the way. And that last phrase, on the way, also matters. Bartimaeus did not simply receive sight and return to his old spot at the side of the road. He followed Jesus on the way. Leaving the cloak at the side of the road quietly marks his turning point of his new life. The cloak belonged to his life before Jesus. The road he followed after his encounter with Jesus was totally different. In the larger context of Scripture, the scene is very significant, very important. Jesus often calls people while they are still in places of need, limitation, and dependence. Jesus does not wait for them to become whole or complete on their own before he calls them. But when his call comes, it creates a moment of decision, a crucial moment of decision. Something must be left behind, not because it was always evil, but because it belonged to the old way of life, the life before Jesus, before his restoring mercy. Bartimaeus threw aside the cloak because the voice of Jesus became more important than the security of what he had once known. That may be why Mark preserved the detail. Sometimes the clearest sign of faith is not that a person already sees everything clearly, but that when Jesus calls, they rise and they move toward his voice without holding on to the old things that once helped them remain where they were. Today, I want to encourage you. Make Jesus, choose for Jesus to be the most important thing in your life. Guys, thanks for taking a few moments here with me today. Hope you have a great Tuesday, and may God continue to bless us as we do not let anything hinder our following him. Take care.